want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us again. This has been a really great experience for us the last few weeks, and we hope that you're enjoying it as much as we are. So just a little bit about who we are. Obviously, MedTech, Rachel Robinson, I'm our vice president. Am I echoing?
A little bit.
A little bit? Ooh, let's see if I can make that go away. Or I'll just stop talking. I'll introduce Brian, and he can walk through a little bit of an update from MedTech, what we've been doing this week, and then we'll jump into a really great lineup of speakers. Just a note, if you are not speaking, keep yourself on mute to keep the background noise down, and hopefully we won't have any echoes or issues.
Great, thanks, Rachel, and hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our fourth member town hall. It's hard to believe. I feel like the time has just flown by. It's been almost 4 full weeks since we went into hibernation seclusion. But I think after kind of watching myself on this town hall for a few weeks now, I've pledged to be a lot more peppy. And I just want to say thank you all for attending these programs. They give us something to look forward to every week, and we're having a great time doing them. I hope we're getting you the information you need. I just want to give a couple quick updates on what's going on in MedTech. This week, we announced a fabulous alliance with MassBio. This alliance essentially makes MedTech members affiliate members of the Massachusetts Biotechnology Council. Why is this a big deal? They have some tremendous purchasing benefits through the New England Edge, which we are now a part of. This allows us to get discounts at companies like Veolia, WB Mason, and Thermo Fisher. So I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about what it can open up for us in terms of cross-collaboration. I think over the past few weeks, what has been really exciting is when we jumped in together to work with MassBio on the response to COVID-19, we've been able to create some really meaningful programs. Specifically, I just want to point to that supply chain hub we created back 4 weeks ago. That has been adopted by the state as the official PPE procurement and donation policy. They actually took it all over, so we got to close it down, and it resulted in tens of thousands of pieces of PPE being delivered to the Massachusetts stockpile, which is just, a fabulous bright side story to all this. And there's more information on our website. I encourage you to check it out. We also last Friday was the opening of applications for the Paycheck Protection Plan through the stimulus package. Our bank is Bank of America. We actually, just like you guys, realized quite quickly that the way they opened up the program was a little bit hinky. We immediately alerted our colleagues in Congress, and we're excited to say that those applications are processing right now. So I want to encourage you that if you're coming into problems accessing these programs, if you need additional help, you can contact us. We've also released a COVID-19 resource page on the MassMedic website. We're going to use this page to update you on anything that is critical for you to know during this crisis. So there's a lot of updates on there. There's helpful links, and we'll continue to push things there as well. I also wanted to point out Mass General Brigham's medical device program. They stood up a quick response team at Mass General Hospital and Brigham and Women's Hospital of clinicians, technicians, and other innovative folks to start developing devices that are of immediate need for the hospital system, and they're looking for partners in manufacturing. So they reached out to us. We sent out an email last week. It is also on the COVID-19 Resource Center. But I would encourage you, if you would like to make relationships with the folks over there, thinking beyond where we're going to be out of this, it's a good place to lend some expertise to make some connections. I've seen a lot of, we've often talked on these town halls about sort of the balance between trying to sell during these times. I would say the best advice that I see is, offer your help, and the sale will come. Build the relationship. There's a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of opportunity for our partners in contract manufacturing and for people with expertise in medical device manufacturing. So we're going to keep updating the COVID-19 Resource Center for you. But make sure to check that out. All you have to do is go to our homepage, which Rachel is standing in front of virtually, and you can just click on that button and you'll get all the information you need. But that's all I have from Mass Medic's virtual HQ. Thank you again for attending, and I'm really excited for what's coming. And I think we're planning these 1 week at a time, and we have some great programming coming up over the next a couple weeks for you.
Awesome. And just so everybody knows, I did put the link to the resource center in the chat bot. So the best way, if you have questions as we're making this presentation go on for any of our speakers, raise your hand or put the question in the chat bot, and we'll help moderate those during the Q&A portion. So I think to start, we're going to ask Mark McElduff from Avania to give us a bit of an update about clinical trials and how the group is working. As we all know, things are kind of shut down right now. So what are the options for pivoting from where you're at and what your plans were with clinical trials? And some questions hopefully from the audience come in, and we can have a great discussion. So Mark, I will give it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. And I'm going to pull up a few slides just to speak to here. So can the attendees see the slide deck? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you first to Mass Medic for putting this on. I know that formerly BBA, but now Avania, we're proud supporters of Mass Medic and Mass Bios. So congratulations on the announcement this week, and thank you for putting on the town halls. I think briefly, I can just introduce Avania. We are a full-service clinical research organization, so a service provider that offers a truly full-service packaging of strategic consulting in both regulatory and clinical, all the way through clinical trial execution. We have offices in Europe and Australia, as well as in San Diego and Massachusetts in the US. I think Brian was speaking to some of the business impact. From our standpoint, what we're seeing is kind of an increase in the consulting work in the regulatory and clinical consulting departments, and obviously a decrease in the clinical operations and our staff that is more monitoring focused or site focused. But I wanted to just kind of briefly talk about our approach to response, and then also what the regulatory bodies and regulatories have done in response as well, and then talk a little bit about some of the EUA programs that we've been supporting over the past few weeks. So I think probably a few weeks late on this, but the current climate is, sites are really prioritizing patient safety. So both for any patients actively enrolled, or if they were scheduled for enrolled, maybe just omitting or putting enrollment on halt for a bit. So with that, both patient access and site access has been very limited. We've run into a number of sites either furloughing study coordinators or moving them to different departments within the hospital. So kind of putting research either to a standstill or at least slowing it down considerably. We have had some sponsors move up their payments kind of more proactively, so monthly rather than quarterly, to hopefully assist some of the hospitals with paying study coordinators and keeping them on staff during this difficult time. We're seeing elective surgeries and non-essential surgeries become kind of the lowest priority, or even being canceled altogether at hospitals. So again, putting clinical research on stand. The impact for the trials are really delayed startup, hopefully not too delayed, but delayed startup. We've had some clients halting enrollment altogether. We have one client that flies people in from Europe to proctor the cases. So obviously with travel on hold, that trial has had to kind of pause until we lift the ban on travel from Europe. And then obviously missed visits and missed assessments for active patients in trials, and we'll kind of go through our COVID-19 planning. Regulatories have responded well. Both FDA and EMA have released guidances to kind of increase tolerance or leniency at this period. So I encourage people, there's a couple references there at the bottom, but I encourage you to look that up and kind of see what the regulatory's response is. IRBs, both local and central, have also released both site-specific and kind of more centralized guidances about how to deal with remote visits and remote monitoring in this period as well. So I think as a CRO, we tried to be pretty proactive in the response, looking at each project kind of on a project-by-project basis and trying to review study plans for the impact. Any clinical trial with active patients or that was in startup, we've issued COVID specific study plans. And I'll just kind of briefly highlight some of the challenges and mitigations to take in considering that. I think protocol deviations obviously is the top priority. IRB and the regulatory bodies kind of assume that there'll be a high volume of missed visits or missed assessments. We are trying to document those and any deviations to the protocol, as well as any internal SOPs in our QMS. We're listing those and making sure the documentation is all captured there. There's rapid and documented risk mitigation in that process. We use a risk assessment categorization tool called the RACT, and we have tried to update that to be COVID specific on each project. Where possible, we're asking patients to be able to be available remotely, either by telephone check-in. And this, again, is more based on what the coordinators are available to do and maybe what kind of follow-up visits you have in your protocol that would allow for remote assessments. One study we're working on is sending out kind of EKGs to be able to be administered remotely. Obviously, when you have a like a Holter monitor with 12 leads and you're asking the patient to kind of put that on themselves, there's going to be some errors maybe with the data collection. So really just documentation of those kind of examples is very critical. Our data management team and biostatisticians have been looking at the SAPs and EDCs for how the data will be collected and really trying to make it transparent and easy for the agency to look at any subgroup analyses that may be requested down the line of pre-COVID or post-COVID activity. And I think, yeah, again, maintaining office operations, our staff, I think in the service industry used to working remotely, but I think, you know, maybe manufacturing or sponsors on the other hand have some more challenges to consider there, but documenting anything that you've put in place would be our recommendation. Again, I think the regulatories have increased tolerance. There's some window there where they're allowing you to make decisions without filing like a formal clinical protocol amendment or an IDE supplement. So I think documentation is key, and when time allows, you want to be able to submit that to the agencies. We also created an internal task force to try to assess kind of the changing climate on a daily basis. We're trying to post and make available any regulatory documentations through our website. This task force is also managing the project-specific COVID-19 plans. And then finally, I just want to touch on the different regulatory pathways that are being made available. I guess highlighting mostly in the US where we're seeing the higher volume of cases, but I think the FDA, people on the phone will agree, has been pretty good about trying to put out these pathways for either rapid review or rapid approval. There's the emergency use authorization that basically allows you to submit any products that may be useful here in this time to deal with COVID without the data collection or approvals that might be required under an IDE or IND. A couple weeks ago, I guess early last week, the CTAP program was released. That's more on biologics and pharma, but another good program to be exploring if you have a product that could potentially assist patients here. European notified bodies have kind of pulled together a fast track review similar to what the FDA did with the EUA. that was released, a week or two ago. I think what we're seeing is they're kind of allowing some products in more quickly now. And then our office in Australia has a rapid registration program. Again, similar, any products or drugs that could help treat COVID patients are being looked at rather quickly and being allowed into the clinic. So I kind of alluded to the uptake in regulatory and clinical consulting. We've had 20 regulatory submissions in the US and Australia in the last 3 weeks, mostly in the US just due to the volume of I guess products that are looking to get out there to clinics to help treat the patients. The FDA, I would say, is very responsive. As soon as you kind of submit anything to the respiratory or renal branches, they're picking up the phone and talking you through the process, and it's a rather easy application, I would say. Most of the products that we are submitting right now are either ventilators, personal protection equipment, that we've done a couple blood filters, some diagnostics, and also blood product, plasma products for kind of traumatic or emergent cases. So I think, again, just highlighting there that the regulatory bodies are being responsive and willing to work with you. The branches that are not impacted as much, I think, are also seem to be very responsive to submissions right now. So while they're fully work remote, I think that they have some increased in downtime or something because the IDE submissions kind of in branches that are less impacted, like spine, are going through much quicker than the 30 days that they would usually be taking. So that was the requested material, and I think just wanted to allow for some questions and answers, or maybe just some other sharing from other service providers.
Fantastic. Don't be hesitant to raise hands or jump in on the chat bot with any questions. Brian, I have one, but if you have one, do you want to ask first?
Yeah, actually a couple. So have we looked at all about the impact on total study results from these, I would call them reporting delays or check-in delays? Is there concern at all in the community that these study results might be compromised because of it?
Yeah, so limited direct interaction with FDA right now. I'm a biostatistician in training, so what we're doing is looking at different impact on maybe study powering analysis if we have to look at a subgroup of patients that maybe don't have any protocol deviations and don't have any missed visits, what kind of power the study might have. And then just talking through with our sponsors, this is a potential impact on your trial design. You might be 50 patients short because of all these missed visits during this period. Do you want to consider opening enrollment to some more patients once kind of the COVID crisis lifts a little bit?
Mm-hmm. And then is there any guidance you're offering in terms of sort of go, no go, depending on stage of where you're at with the clinical trial? So if you were ready to go before this, are you advising clients just to start, or is it like only if you're currently actively have enrolled folks in a trial that you should continue it? Otherwise, what's the guidance there for that you guys are giving?
Yeah, I guess hard to foresee. What we're telling clients is like Q4 before we're able to start any new projects with the clinical sites. So what we're trying to do is encourage sponsors that might have study startup materials to generate or databases to build, that they continue with that kind of effort, and just knowing that their ultimate first patient in timeline might be a little bit delayed.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Any other questions? That first one was my question, Brian. I was concerned, what does the data actually mean? And should there be concern among people doing this that they're going to go through this process and keep moving along, and then the FDA is going to say, oh, well, we were relaxed, but now we're not anymore. You're going to have to do it over. So I think that would be my concern. And also the point that you made about other areas being a lot freer with their time, does that mean that people should try to take advantage of that? If I were a company that could potentially move into that a little more quickly, does that mean that that might be more advantageous for me to take advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to kind of encourage that from our sponsor companies, is that the agency does seem to be pretty responsive right now, and we could be taking advantage of that, or yeah, use the opportunity, if you will.
Awesome. I think that for me is really interesting, right, to think about, and not something I probably would have considered before, that there might be people sitting around in other areas just kind of waiting for things to come in because things are slow. So awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. That was great. Okay, awesome. Next up, we are going to have Jake Stebbins from TriNet give us a little bit of an overview of the things you need to be thinking about from an HR perspective in regard to the CARES Act.
Thank you. All right, let me see if I can do this properly. All right. So I'm Jake. I work for a company called TriNet, which I'll introduce us a little bit more in a second. One of the things that I think the shift from everybody working in office to working remotely, turns a lot of HR heads. I'll preface all this by saying I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to talk about what I'm seeing. I'm the local life science and medical device sales rep for the Massachusetts Cambridge market. So I have a lot of interactions with your peers, I'm sure. But a couple of things I want to talk to today after I kind of introduce ourselves. So TriNet, who are we? TriNet is a PEO, which is a professional employer organization. Basically what we do on a very high level is we partner with companies to give them HR support and to give them more benefits and workers' compensation insurance buying power than they would normally have on their own. So think of it a little bit like insurance grouping, but with a lot more. We have an HRIS platform that manages these entire processes built in. And on the screen, you can see, we have some great relationships in the area. One I'll just touch on briefly due to time was Brammer Bio, which I think, was a great success story of ours. They came on board when they had around 100 worksite employees. They exited when they were bought by Thermo Fisher for all the money in the world, apparently. And they ended at about 800 employees. And we were able to help them scale incredibly rapidly. So one of our biggest advantages is we are a plug-and-play solution. So no matter where you have employees in the United States, we're able to help service them. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today, and the main reason for this content, was the CARES Act and, how we're interacting with the employee population now. I've seen stories from the range of gamut, as you can probably imagine, which is people are laying off 90% of their staff, right? All the way to, hey, we're still remaining fully staffed because, we're able to do remote work, or we're in the process of making sure we're keeping our people whole, and everything in between. I'm going to point out on the screen, you'll see TriNet. We do have what we call our Business Resiliency Center. And in there, you're going to find videos and webinars and blog posts from our chief legal, heads of HR, all these really, really great sources of information that, I do hope that people get a chance to go on there and poke around a little bit. The one that I like the best right now is we actually have our chief legal who actually came on and talked about 2 different scenarios versus, with the CARES Act, you kind of look at it in 2 different ways. You have the option to go through the PPP or the SBA loans. And then you also have the other option of going through the tax credit and tax deferment process. What makes most sense for you really determines, your individual model. And a couple terms that I wanted to talk about before I speak about it, the terms nowadays that are being thrown around, things like layoff, things like furlough, reduction in force, leave of absence, termination, while there's no generally, enforced rule for these terminologies, you really do need to be careful what terms you're using when you're speaking to the employee population these days. Layoff is one that I see thrown around a lot, and they use it to supersede every other term. You know, a layoff really is a temporary suspension of your employee-employer relationship due to lack of work. And to use it in another way, shape, or form, such as a full-blown termination, which can be not just for lack of work, but maybe you're just moving on from an employee. To use those, you should not be using them interchanging. Another one you'll see thrown around a lot is furlough, right? What does furlough mean? A lot of people didn't even know it was a term until last month when everybody talked about these furlough notifications. So a furlough is a temporary reduction in either working hours or overall staff, including payroll amounts that you're paying these people and hours worked. So it has a little bit more leeway than a true layoff. Layoffs and furloughs both currently, because of the CARES Act and the state working together, allow employees to file for unemployment. So you can actually have an employee on furlough. You know, maybe they went from working 40 hours a week to working 8. You can do that as a furlough and still allow them to go claim unemployment for that remaining loss of income. Another one that I see all over the place is reduction of force. So reduction of force, you need to be careful. They also call it a RIF. A reduction of force, you do need to be kind of careful because there needs to be a legitimate business reason, obviously, for the amount of terminations that you're doing in a reduction in force. Additionally, a reduction in force is very much what you only do if you do not believe you can be bringing back the same amount of employees once all of this has kind of come to a head. So a reduction in force is not a temporary measure, as wild as some people think it would be. It's more of a long-term play. So I would just be careful. You know, the loans and especially the SBA loans have built into them very specific rules for the forgivability of that loan. In fact, what you'll see, and if anybody's read up on it a lot, which, you know, there's so much language in there. I think it was like 440 pages or something outrageous. You know, the biggest, you know, problem with the SBA loans is that there's, you know, language in there that if you're not bringing back 90% of your staff, or you're reducing salaries by more than 25%, the forgivability of that SBA loan is going to be called into question, and it may not be forgiven at all. So you really just need to be careful about how you're going about, you know, these layoffs or furloughs or terminations, whatever you decide to do. And this really impacts the amount that, you know, you want to take advantage of that SBA loan versus the tax credits and tax deferrals. And I think everybody talks about the SBA loans because they are great. You know, if you have a business where, you know, you plan on bringing the employees back whole, you know, you're going to ramp right back up very quickly, or maybe you want to pay them throughout this just because, you know, you need to be ready the second it's possible to bring these people back and get back to work, then an SBA loan may be the correct direction to go in. If you have an employee population where, let's say you had 80 employees and you're down to 10, 15 right now, right? And you're really questioning whether you're going to be able to bring back all of those people full time, you really might want to take a look at the tax deferrals and tax credit. Just so everybody understands, there is an either or scenario. So you cannot be taking advantage of the deferments and credits while also having the SBA loan. So it is a pick your poison kind of direction that you need to head in. The deferrals are pretty great. You know, it's basically deferring Social Security taxes on your payroll, right, for the remainder of 2020. You know, those taxes are going to be deferred. Half of it's deferred to 2021. The other half of it's deferred to 2022, right? So you're giving yourself some more runway there. The tax credits, I think, are really fantastic. The tax credits in general, you know, if you're going to keep at that lower workforce, you can actually get 50% of the wages for those employees that are currently working for you for the remainder of the year credited, up to $10,000 in salary. So you're looking at close to $5,000 an employee in tax credits. So that's definitely, you know, a powerful thing, especially if you're reducing force. You know, TriNet, we do a lot to try and inform our, you know, clients. We have about 18,000 right now nationally. We have 340,000 worksite employees on our platform. So we deal with this a lot. And what you kind of need to understand is when you are taking a look at these different options, it's incredibly important to use a model that is specific to your business, because what the person next door to you is doing is not going to be maybe what makes the most sense for you. So just on a really, really high level, you know, luckily with us, we have workforce analytics built into our platform, which is fantastic, which allows you to not only run these models, but also to run the appropriate reports and shoot them over to the SBA for approval very quickly. And so just, you know, on a really high level, just being aware of these different options that you have. I know we're talking about now a second package that may come through, another $1 trillion package, which we don't know what that's going to look like yet, but it is pretty important. With the CARES Act, there's one other really big impactful piece that I think needs to be mentioned, and that is the extension of the tax deadlines for businesses. So I always bring this up because if you're not taking a look at every avenue for saving dollars in tax credits, you're really missing out. And now that you have this extension, you may have the ability to take a look at what you're doing for R&D tax credits, you know, more in depth. You know, R&D tax credits in the state of Massachusetts are even crazier than they are on a federal level. But really what you need to be looking for, this can offset payroll taxes, this can offset, you know, work expenditures, this can offset supply purchases, this can offset so many different things. The R&D tax credit process here in the state through the Massachusetts Life Science Center and also federally is fantastic. And, you know, TriNet ourselves as a PEO, we help them process these tax credits. We actually processed over $90 million of R&D tax credits so far. This is just money on the table. If you're not taking advantage of these R&D tax credits, you know, we have partnerships with Moss Adams. We have partnerships with all these other people that can help you with these, you know, organizational changes. And there is a little bit of an example, which is pretty cool. So, you know, we secured $150,000 in R&D tax credits for one of our clients, which is wild. I mean, that's a lot of money that you could be leaving on the table if you're not taking advantage of these. So that's kind of my closing piece. There's a lot of options that you can be doing with the extension of the deadlines, with the CARES Act, and really it just comes down to what makes the most sense for your business. I am always available to have these conversations. I can bring you to these people that will do the analysis for you, and they'll do it very in depth. You know, because it comes down to, you know, taking a look at your specific circumstance. So, you know, if you have any questions, you know, Rachel can put us in touch, and I'll help out.
That was great, Jake. Thank you. And I did get a couple of just messages from people in the audience asking, you know, I would love to share these slides afterwards with everyone. So, and we'll make sure to share Jake's contact information so you can contact him directly. So I'll send out an email to all the attendees afterwards with these links. But I mean, some of the things you just said are so crucial. I really do appreciate you saying that, especially, you know, I'm definitely one of those people that had no idea what a furlough was before a month ago. And now I'm trying to coach my parents through it, right? So it's very,
yeah.
I'd love to say we're all in the med device industry and we're keeping our jobs, but it's going to be very different for a long time. And understanding the difference between the paperwork that goes into these things and what they are and aren't eligible for is great, not only from an employer standpoint, but from an employee standpoint as well, understanding what the difference is. So, Kathy, that's a great question. And I think, you know, Jake, do furloughed employees keep their health insurance is a good one.
It's case by case. It really comes down to what the employer is choosing to do. You know, the tricky piece about that as an employer is, if I wanted to keep my employees whole, which, you know, we obviously would hope that would be the thing, because I'm, as an employer, if I'm keeping my employees whole for their health insurance, I'm actually on the hook for all of it for the month, right? So my deduction as an employee is probably going to go away because I'm not working enough hours to probably even cover that, right? So when they're applying for the SBA loans, that can be part of what they're requesting for funding. So it's kind of, you know, if they're going to furlough the employees and they're going to go for the SBA loan, they might as well keep the employee whole, because you're going to be getting that money back from the SBA anyways, to cover it. So, you know, and you want to think about these great things that, you know, I want to do what's best for me. The biggest thing that I'm going to see after this, and I think we're all going to see this, is what employers kept their employees whole and happy during this and which ones didn't. Because I guarantee you, with as competitive as our market was prior to this whole situation going down with the you know, competing for talent, if you were not nice to your employees while this was going on, they're out the door because they got other job offers. Everybody has job offers nowadays. Just go on LinkedIn for 5 minutes and you'll have 30 recruiters talking to you.
Great. Brian, you had a question?
Yeah, Jake, great information. Thank you so much. What the time you talked about the 90%, bringing 90% of those employees back and the 25% pay cut. What's the time frame on the loan forgivability? So they're giving you 2.5 months of pay. Do they say like how long you have to keep those employees for that loan to get forgiven?
So I'm not 100% on this, so I don't want to give the wrong information. I have heard by the end of 2020. So there is an understanding of ramping back up. You know, the term for the loan, while they're talking about, is 8 weeks, I believe, right? But the whole point of this, and I think with the next package, which we're going to see, because everybody thought we were going to be back, you know, to work by Easter, which is this weekend, and that's not happening. They're going to see that there'll probably be an extension of the deadline. I think what we'll see is probably by the end of 2020 will be the deadline, because they're going to, while they're doing their taxes for next year, this is going to be impacting, right? So.
Great.
Yeah, I think there's a scale, if I may add. This is Maria. So I think, Brian, there's a scale for like how long the employees should be you know, brought back on, and we can share that after this call. But it's assuming that, you know, the folks are going to be retained back so that you know, you can maximize the forgiveness of the loan.
One quick follow-up question. Is the assumption that they will be retaining the employees that they let go, or that they will be staffing up to just the same level? So is there an assumption that they'll be hiring back the exact same staff that was laid off, or that they will be bringing it back up to a percentage level that they were at before?
Once again, you need to, that's kind of the conversation, the difference between a furlough and a layoff, right? A furlough, you need to be restaffing those same employees, because you're not terminating the employee-employer relationship. You're saying, I don't have work for you this week, but you're still technically an enrolled employee. With a layoff, you're terminating that relationship completely. The question that it's a fantastic question. And to the best of my knowledge, we don't have an answer yes or no. So there could be hey, I had 80 people, I hired 80 people, only 60 are the same, right? We don't know if that's going to be allowed, and we don't know if it's not going to be allowed. So there's just there's still so much up in the air as far as it is with these legislations, that, you know, it's best to move as carefully as possible. And, you know, frankly, in my opinion, if you have good employees, why wouldn't you want to bring them back? And you're going to have a hard enough time trying to find them, especially in Massachusetts anyways. So to think I'm going to go out and find, you know, another 20 people to replace the 20 that I'm losing is it's a bad idea. There was such a gap in talent already. So.
Okay, one last question, because then we do need to go forward, but I want to make sure we get this one out there as well, because I am curious as well. Is there guidance about forcing people to take leave? If you're furloughing, can you force your employees to take their PTO even though they haven't earned it? And how does that kind of work? Or is it not something that you can make them do?
So for that, you need to look at your employee handbook. Right? People are using the PTO policy as a way of giving money when maybe they don't have work. So we have seen that happen a ton, where we said, hey, once again, I use that example. Hey, you were working 40 hours a week for me. I got 8 or 10 hours of work max that, you know, I'm going to need from you over the next couple of weeks. You had 60 hours of vacation or 40 hours of vacation. Can I pay you out on that to supersede the gap? The reality situation is, with the unemployment the way that they're doing it now, and then now with the federal government even giving more money on top of the unemployment that the state would give, there's a less incentive to do that. If you're going to come back, they're not going to want to lose all that accrued PTO. But it really comes down to your employee handbook for most of these cases. If you have it as a policy that once somebody's terminated, they get their PTO paid out, or you pay it out at the end of the year, you're probably going to be on the hook for paying it out. But if not, you may not have to.
Awesome. Thank you. Jake, Maria, thank you guys so much for chiming in on this. This is a really important topic, and I think a lot of really fantastic information. And I think it leads really great into our next topic with John Compton and Kathy Provost from Agile Search. So some of the scenarios that were just mentioned, right, are bringing people back on, but also how do you ramp up and how do you get new people in? You're not doing in-person interviews. We're not doing in-person onboarding. What's the process and what are some tips there? So John and Kathy, love your perspective on this.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Yeah, thanks, Rachel and Brian and MassMedic for inviting us today. We want to share some trends we're seeing basically, and hopefully some valuable takeaways for everybody. Agile Search, we're talent acquisition specialists focused on the Boston MedTech sector. We've been doing it a long time, 15 years for Agile Search. And Kathy and I, 35 years, I think is what it says on the website, but we figured out it's more like 40. Who knows, maybe that's too many, right, Kathy? But anyway, as a company, we focus on high quality over quantity. We apply that philosophy to everything from our daily interactions with client companies and job seekers to the matches that we make. It also applies to our digital marketing strategy, which we're going to share some trends on right now. No surprise, as mid-March came, our company saw a big pullback on many of the active searches and requisitions across the board. But as you know, many med techs are still hiring at the same pace they were even from before the pandemic. They're keeping an eye on the business going smartly. And today, so what we're going to talk about specifically is what we're hearing out there from Massachusetts med tech and device companies, the ones who are still bringing people on board. We'll be looking at virtual interviewing and hiring, virtual onboarding, and then we'll wrap up with some strategies specifically for times like this, both for talent acquisition, but also for job seekers. And if you're neither of those, as Rachel alluded to before, maybe you're a mentor, maybe you're a hiring manager who's got to lay somebody off. So hopefully some of these takeaways can help you, even if you're not one of those people. So thanks, and I'm going to hand it over to Kathy now. Kathy heads account management for Agile Search. Take it away, Kathy.
Yeah, hello everybody. So as John mentioned, we looked out, surveyed our clients and candidates in preparation for this virtual town hall, and we did find a number of companies kind of halting hiring and perhaps moving into the furlough mode. Still others have dropped from maybe 30 or 40 requisitions down to 3 or 4 key hires. And then on the other spectrum are some clients that are just continuing hiring at the normal pace. And these, for instance, Next Stage Medical, who is related to helping fight the coronavirus with their dialysis kidney machines. They, for instance, in the last 3 weeks did 11 hires. So it's all across the board. So as John mentioned, I'll present on virtual hiring and onboarding, and got some slides to share with you. So let me bring those up. Okay, can you see them?
Yeah.
Alrighty. So first off, with virtual hiring, let me cover some pitfalls, and then I'll move into some best practices with virtual hiring. So hiring managers are expressing concern about the face-to-face, missing that, and many of them help assess the cultural or the interpersonal fit. So they are certainly missing that, but they are plowing ahead in any case. Many candidates are concerned about missing the site visit, actually seeing the physical facility. In a number of cases, our clients are putting together virtual tours, either a simple handheld virtual tour, or even one with deeper pockets is doing a professional video and adding a CEO message. So it almost becomes a recruitment tool. Another pitfall is that background checks are elongated during this time. Vendors are stretched. with their staffs, and if you have to pull paper from district courts, et cetera, for criminal background checks, that's certainly elongated process during this day. Best practices for virtual hiring. So certainly it is technology enabled. Some of the applications that are being utilized in this space are Blue Jeans, Microsoft Teams, and WebEx. I mentioned that creating a virtual tour to share with the candidates is a best practice. We are seeing a larger role being played by HR to help prepare the candidate, perhaps calling them ahead of time, ensuring that they are able to download the application and run it, and doing a test drive. Another of our clients is utilizing a backup in case of internet tech or glitches, having an open conference call line going in case of technology failure there. And I mentioned Next Stage. They've instituted a survey of new hires to gain feedback and fold that back into the process, and just to continually improve. One side benefit is the ease of scheduling. No longer do you have to make sure everyone's in the office and find a day that is back to back to back, but you can do virtual interviewing now over a few days. So that are some best practice for virtual hiring. And then, of course, once you do have a candidate on board, you need to move to the virtual onboarding. And we can think about this in a couple of ways. Certainly, there's a short-term virtual onboarding, the first day, the first week, benefits, orientation, compliance training, et cetera. But we do want to give a tip of the hat to the longer-term virtual onboarding. And as we think about onboarding, oftentimes it's given short shrift, the longer-term onboarding. And that's that holistic months-long process of really acclimating and integrating the employee. So we do want everybody, hiring managers and organizations, to kind of be mindful of what's going on for a new hire. And that is, if you ever recall, when you start a new job, you're in heavy compliance mode. You are feeling a certain level of uncertainty, and you're striving to fit in and form relationships and kind of understand the rules written and unwritten about and how all this is going to help you integrate and get up to top speed. So this certainly is exacerbated in the current times of remote virtual employment. So the best advice that we can offer to hiring managers and organizations is to first recognize that it is a holistic months-long process. As a hiring manager or an organization, over-communicate, mentor, guide, offer feedback, be available. Know that your new employee is feeling even more uncertain during this time. And then build in time for recognition and celebration, which can be done even remotely. So those are some thoughts on best practices for virtual hiring and onboarding. And now I'd like to toss it back to John, who will offer a bigger picture view and some strategies today in terms of talent acquisition. John?
Right on. Thanks, Kathy. So whether you're hiring or job seeking or neither, there's a trend happening right now, and we wanted to share it. Kathy, if you could maybe move to the next slide from yours. Great. So that trend is a massive uptick, right? And so what you're seeing, this trend says like never before, what you're posting and engaging with online, it's actually being seen. I got this data from LinkedIn. It was a slideshow of maybe 30 slides. And I thought the message of these 2 slides sort of got crowded out by the other 28 slides. But this shows specifically on LinkedIn, online content shared related to COVID-19, it's up over 2,000%. And the engagement on that content is up over 2,700%. That's January through March. The trend has continued for now, at least. And as we're continuing to learn, I mean, those are some huge numbers. And as we are realizing and learning, all of us, digital content and digital marketing, it's all vital to your company brand. That's for talent acquisition, and to your personal brand, if you're a job seeker or a contributor. So that's one trend. And then maybe move to the next slide now, Kathy. Here's another very interesting trend, and it's positive news. Countries around the world, we all know they're in different stages of uncertainty, but this is a global year-over-year picture of the hiring data from LinkedIn. It does show some promise. See, the US is in green. That's as of March 15th. We're in the earlier stages of our downward dive. Italy in dark blue, well into its downward dive, hopefully at the bottom, while China is in light blue, and it's showing to be trending back upward, slowly but steadily. And I think these hiring rates, while they're from a broader professional market, it's not specific to healthcare or MedTech, but I think these two slides show great insight into the big picture and the opportunity for everyone. And even if you're not hiring or job seeking right now, just remember thoughtful online content, especially during times like these, it can have a big return on investment in building your brand. So next slide, please, Kathy. So the massive uptrend in online engagement, it got us thinking, why? Is it just the nature of the pandemic, or is it something more? And we think professionals of all types are going to LinkedIn. They're going as a place of professional collaboration, sharing, and learning. They want to know, they want to pick their head up and see what's going on with their broader network. What can they learn from their broader network? And I think everyone would agree, there's some amazing teamwork going on out there right now, even across competitive lines, right? A lot of people on this call are a part of it. So those are the two trends, and something that I thought might be valuable. And a couple more things to think about, as far as creating effective content that builds your brand. We're not digital marketing experts, but in terms of creating value, we've learned some lessons along the way. We've seen what works and what doesn't. It's informative and relevant content that will always be well received. And a final point, unless you're Bill or Melinda Gates, or if you have something really important to say, and a lot of people do, but in general, if you're a nobody like me and trying to be a somebody, less is usually more. And you want to get your best foot forward out there. You want to be seen, but you don't want to be getting it out there so much that you're tripping up the positive momentum that's happening. And we're happy to talk with you further about that if you are a job seeker. That wraps up what we wanted to share today. We wish you all the best with building your brands and continuing to collaborate well. It goes without saying, MedTech is playing a critical and central role in this problem and the problems ahead. Thanks for everything you do. Information on how to contact Kathy or I is below, and we'd love to hear from you. All right, thanks a lot.
John, I just had a real quick question before we jump to the next topic. It seems like with the trends and with everything that's happening, there should be a really big opportunity for brands that are maybe sitting around and saying, okay, we're not doing as much as we want to right now. Our plans are kind of on hold. How do we best make use of the time? It would seem like re-examining and revamping the value proposition of your hiring process would be a really strong one to focus on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, that's the point we're trying to put out. Investing in your talent acquisition strategy, if you have time to do it right now, could be valuable. And really, even if you don't have time right now, think about your talent acquisition strategy just as part of your collaboration process. And as far as how your company contributes value, like Brian said earlier, build a relationship. What better way to do that than to contribute right now? So.
Fantastic. Awesome. So someone just chimed in and said, you're saying it's a great time to evaluate HRIS systems. Thanks, Jake. No, thank you, Kathy and John, for that very insightful process and thoughts. We really do appreciate it. So we're going to move quickly to our last topic, and I think it's a really important one. If you were on the call last week, you heard Stacy Swider from UMass Lowell talk about a lot of the grant and funding opportunities that the government is making available right now in ways that they never have before. And when I asked her, what type of things are, is the government looking to invest in, she specifically mentioned products for home use, home health care. So we thought this would be a great opportunity for Alex and Adam at Sunrise Labs to join us for a really quick understanding and overview. I don't know, Sunrise Labs does a ton of work with developing products for home use, and thought it'd be really great for them to share some tips with us. If you've never been into this process before of designing for the home, it's very different than designing for use in a hospital. So Adam, Alex, if you will take it away, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Rachel. We are seeing an uptake in telemedicine and an interest in things at home. We do a lot of this work anyway. Sunrise does a fair amount of connected devices, and we are about 100-person company. And we do full development, including a lot of software, which includes both the devices and connectivity. So people who are interested in home devices or connected devices, we work with. Specifically now, we are getting calls for people who, of course, in this crisis are interested in it. So we wanted to just share some of those thoughts that we have, because we do about 30 projects a year, which gives us a very broad perspective, and we wanted to share that with you, so that if there are opportunities there, so this is a good forum for that. We'll start by saying that we're actually going to give a webinar in the coming weeks. So this is really just a preview, and so we're just going to give little tidbits in bait to try to give you some bigger picture ideas, but it's not the full presentation here. So we're just going to touch on a few ideas that we'll talk about later in the future. It is a big topic, home use care and telemedicine. So we're going to focus here on kind of a very big picture, which is really from the top level of balancing the needs of a home use model, where there really are different needs from different users. For example, there's a business model where you're trying to make your system meet that business model. There's technology issues, and there's user needs, and sometimes there's trade-offs between them. So that's something that we deal with a lot, and trying to help guide companies through that balancing act. For example, companies typically want to reduce their project risk, on the onset. And so sometimes we talk a lot about starting small with a minimum viable product, and balancing the cost and the schedule with all the features that you might put in. And balancing that with the needs of the business, because the business might have lots of things they want to do. So today we'll just touch on a couple of issues, some of the user issues. And so an example might be, in the home there are very specific user issues, and there's really, you can think of this as different users of your system. For example, you have the home user, somebody who has to use that device. You'll have a physician who might have to make use of the information of that. Then the company itself has their own desires. They might have R&D or sales and marketing or service, and those different groups have different needs. So balancing that is into a development project that's cohesive is a really important perspective to have. So if you think about, for example, what does the user want? The user might, he wants to have something that he really gets some value out of the time that he's going to use this device. People don't want to spend time on things because they have a gadget. They want to do it because they have some value, and it has to be easy to use. They want their privacy established, and the physician really wants actionable information. For example, he doesn't want a flood of information that he's going to have to watch, and they want improved outcomes. The company might want something. Of course, they want those things as well, but they also have a business model to support. So they have a big business infrastructure, they want to support. They might want data for improving algorithms. They might want to control payment or mechanisms of usage, and they might want the ability to service and diagnose the devices. And those are different things than what the user cares about, for example. So and they can be at odds with each other. So we talk a lot about balancing those things. For example, like the user might not want to share medical information, but the company might want to gather information to maybe maybe upgrade their algorithms or their machine learning, collect data on various things. So when this balance is off, the market acceptance of the product can be impacted because people won't want to use it if it's too hard to use, for example. So we do, again, back to Sunrise, we have a software, we do software development, electronics, mechanical, and systems. We also have usability, we do usability work, and we have Alex Therian here today, who is our director of usability, and he's going to talk about some issues that are specific to home use for medical devices. So take it away, Alex.
Thanks, Adam. So in practice, what does balance really mean? It's going to increase the likelihood of adoption of your product. To succeed here, you really got to meet your users where they live. Many healthcare companies are trying to leverage platforms like smartphones and connected health and apps to be an efficient platform for getting into the home. And what happens when they do that is they're making the mistake of trying to emulate lifestyle brands and create things like sticky experiences where users are coming back often into the app or the product. If you think about it, it's not really meeting patients where they live. A company doing that could be unintentionally shifting patients into defining themselves rather than as a person, then they're forcing the patients to define themselves more as a patient. We all have relationships in our lives. We're husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, we have children, we have friends. That's the kind of relationships that enrich us. If we become somebody who has a chronic condition that is the focus of our lives, it really kind of brings down your patients' motivations and makes them a lot less likely to engage in your product. So what does that mean practically? Meeting those user needs and not being intrusive into their lives, lowering the amount of notifications, demands for patient attention, and really just focusing on, absolutely when it's the highest impact and value to your end patient population and where you're going to provide an intervention that is meaningful. Focusing more on passive interactions and things where you can collect the data that you need to make the calculation or to provide the most effective therapy. Doing that passively and through sensors and other types of passive interactions, it's allowing your users to be emotionally engaged in the rest of their lives, which actually has a great patient benefit and a great patient outcome. So meeting them where they are and allowing them to be real people with real lives. An alternative example is what we expect out of our clinicians. Adam did mention that doctors don't want a flood of data. They want insights that they can act on. They got into healthcare really because they wanted to improve the lives of patients and they wanted to connect with people. They didn't want to be modeling data all the time. And your device is going to influence directly their ability to feel connected with their patients. And if you're not looking at that relationship that you're trying to foster, you're going to end up getting in the way of that relationship. And if you're putting burden on the doctor, which is an easy way of managing some of the risk analyses that you have to do with medical devices, putting the burden back on the doctor to make a good decision without giving them insights, you're going to be upsetting the balance of that patient-clinician relationship in a way that a doctor is going to feel like you're getting in the way of how they're trying to provide the best care to their patients by adding another burden and another task that they need to manage on a daily basis. They're flooded with so much data right now that they really just want insights and an ability to understand why that insight is the correct one. If it's not fitting into their workflow, it's tough to get that tool adopted if they can't bill for it. If your device it doesn't consider that portion of it, that they work within a healthcare system that expects their time to be billable, and it's already compressing, the management of tools in that system is already helping to compress patient visits down to about 15 minutes. It makes it really tough for them to fit that into their current standard of care and how they're managing their workflow to get the time with the patients that they need. Beyond those broader, fit to their lifestyle, there are some usability engineering realities that we got to consider when we move into the home. And one of the first things to get cut in our push to get a product into the pipeline and from the pipeline into the market is foundational research. And if this is your first foray into the home, it's one of the last areas you should cut, because you're changing the home environment. Even if you understand your technology and if you understand your health condition, the home environment is so different. We tend to see clients analyzing it from, okay, well, it's going to be in the bedroom or the living room, or maybe in the bathroom, and looking at the use environment from that standpoint. But your patients have very rich lives. They travel, they go places. It could be anywhere from camping to going to Disney to a cruise line to international travel. All these considerations can really impact the use safety of your device. Having a device that really anticipates their lifestyle is it's going to help them to have better adherence, and better adherence means that you're going to get better acceptance into their lifestyle and prescription from the doctor. And it's good to understand that the expectations that they're going to have of your product are changing as well. As soon as you go into that environment, your direct comparisons are going to be to the best and brightest of consumer technology. The Apples of the world, the Googles of the world. That level of connectivity is a direct impact on the expectations that your patients are going to have of the system. Connectivity as part of this means that your patients are going to assume certain things are going on just like they are in the rest of their lives. Our data is moving through a variety of clouds right now. You're very used to that. You're getting responses from Siri on a regular basis. We've met patients in studies who are making assumptions on smartphone notifications, for example, that those were directly coming from their clinician as opposed to even from just within the app. In the wrong moment, that could create a real opportunity for patient harm. So you have to really think about the context and the environment that they're in, how those learnings can negatively transfer to your product, and anticipate that as part of your risk management of the product. So engaging in early phase research will really help you to anticipate these challenges, and it's going to open up great opportunities for market disruption for people who are embracing this opportunity to move into the home. So Adam, there's some additional points that Adam was going to talk about from a architecture and infrastructure, and how you can get into the home and make that more effective. And I'll hand it back to him at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. So I'm going to transition here a little bit, just because the topic of our future webinar is going to include some details about the kind of architecture that you would build and how you would actually go about implementing a connected device, whether it's used by clinicians or in the home, really. And this is something that we do a fair amount of. So we are going to be talking about that in the webinar. Just to touch on a couple of points that we're going to talk about, it has to do with being able to have a system that you really want to design the system right, so that you can both quickly build it, but it also will support growth. So often we'll try to ensure that that the architecture that we build, is designed for the future vision, but it's easy to get there in the present, because there's a lot of time to market becomes very important to almost everybody. So, and what that looks like are things like, very, very broadly, we'll have diagrams for this later, but it looks like there's a fleet of devices that are out there. There's some kind of a user interface to those devices. It might be a cell phone. It might be built into the device. There's some connection mechanism. Then there's a server somewhere. Maybe it's in the cloud. Maybe it's your own, that has this front end, and then a data manager where you keep all this data, and a back end which might talk to physicians or the company. So that's kind of an architecture that we incorporate to enhance that, and we'll talk about that in detail later. So there's choices about all those types of platforms. The connection mechanisms, you might want to use a cell phone, you might want to use Wi-Fi, there's Bluetooth, there's all these different choices, and they have pros and cons. With connectivity, it's often the best answer is all of the above, but that can make it complicated, and so we'll talk about those choices too. And finally, we'll talk about managing the change. It's a very dynamic environment. As you know, the infrastructure changes all the time. Cell phones change. Cybersecurity is a big issue nowadays. The FDA does require cybersecurity programs. So the cybersecurity management is something that has to be kept up it's an ongoing program to address those things. Tablets, if you use tablets or cell phones, they change a lot. The wireless infrastructure changes, Wi-Fi changes, and then just getting software updates in a coherent fashion. And then a topic that most people don't think about is open source software. There's lots of open source software that gets used in devices nowadays. And how do you manage that in a way that's compatible with the regulatory environment? So those are topics that we're going to talk about in the webinar. I just wanted to throw them out there as for anybody contemplating this business. There's a fair amount of complexity, and that's, I guess, why it takes a 100-person organization to deal with it, because there's a lot of things you have to do. So that's it for Sunrise in this introduction. And any questions, or Rachel, or?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to chime in. You guys put a lot of great information out there. Alex, I really do appreciate what you said about meeting people where they are and understanding that. It's not something I've heard put that way before. And I think it's really important to understand that, the other piece that you said about creating that barrier between the relationship between the doctor and the patient, I think is also extremely important and not something that I've heard anyone highlight in the past. So I think those two things are incredibly crucial when you're thinking about bringing something to the person, that person is a person, right? It's not, and they may be used to a lot of things, but you've still got to walk them through it and meet them where they're at, and understand that if you want the product to be adopted, there are a lot of critical things that go into that. So really appreciate both of you, Alex, Adam, that was fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to the webinar in 2 weeks. We did include the information in the chat bot for that webinar. So if you have more questions, feel free to shoot it out. I'll put all this information as well into the follow-up email afterwards. I know we are bumping up right on time, so I want to make sure that we have a chance to say thank you to everyone for attending. Really do appreciate you joining us. We'll be back next week with another program, and we've actually got a really great lineup of webinars and virtual programs coming up that we'll be giving you information about really soon. But thank you to all of our speakers. Really do appreciate your support in all of this.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.